feel like having your name first and foremost and your contact information is the first place you should start. I've seen a lot of CVs, especially from European countries, where people have a picture on there. That's definitely not common in where I'm sort of been working. I have received CVs with pictures, and it's one of these things where you kind of look at it and go, I don't know what that added or took away from the CV.
Oh, it's common in the Philippines too.
It is really?
My first CV had my picture in it.
Why? What does add in a picture? Take me through the process. What does adding a picture add to the CV? Welcome to the 20-Minute Mentors podcast. Recorded in Clan by Birth Wing Ed Kun Wedding King Droth Kun Lands and Go Yasilida Go Go Go. Here's your hosts. Hi, and welcome to the 20-Minute Mentors podcast. I'm Matt.
And this is Mike.
And today we're going to be talking about CVs, or curriculum vitae, I think, if you're in a different country. I think CV actually stands for curriculum vitae, but it's just been shortened everywhere, especially in the UK. Do you know them as CVs or curriculum vitae?
To be honest, we call them resumes.
Neither. Fine, okay.
But I think CV kind of has more like a more formal note to it. Not sure though.
I wonder where the word resume comes from.
Because I remember the first time that I made a CV was during my last year in college, because we had a thesis and the instructors made us create a CV. And I was like, what is a CV? They were basically like, do you have a current resume? Yes, I do. Okay, that's the same thing.
Wow. So resume comes from the Latin word re and then sumer, which means backtake. Which is interesting. Learned something already in this podcast.
Yeah, but curriculum vitae, that's also Latin, right?
Probably. We'll look at that while we're talking. So, yes, this episode we're talking about resumes, CVs, curriculum vitae, whatever you want to call them. Essentially, it's the document or piece of paper, if you're old like me, that you would give out to potential business or recruiter or an employer. Now, I have seen a lot of resumes or CVs in my time. In my last few roles, I've worked as a hiring manager and I've hired, about 10 or 15 people across my career. So going through a resume, looking at what content is on there and what people are how people are portraying themselves has been a real big part of what I've been doing over the past, at least my couple of roles. What we want this episode to be is a kind of a what should be on there, how you should be presenting yourself, what formats you could use. There's also some really good resources online. But before we do any of that, I'll take you on my journey of my first resume. So I joined the working world when I left college, actually when I was at college. And my first resume was a copy of my mum's. I got her resume from her. I put it into Word and I copied the format exactly, changed the name, changed the phone number, and then put in my different bits of experience. And I remember looking at it and thinking, it's essentially there's one bit of experience here, which is in the volunteer role I was doing before I got into working. There is very little in education. It's just some GCSEs or the rest of the world sort of secondary school qualifications. There's not really a great deal that I'm selling myself here. So I looked at then, how can I take, what is a volunteer role and some secondary school qualifications and break that out and to be a bit more interesting. So I started putting some of my hobbies on there. And in the end, it ended up being a complete gobbled mess of, this is who I am and I enjoy going out for walks and I enjoy running and I like playing football and I got some B's at GCSE level. So I think having that person to help you steer what information should and shouldn't be on your CV and how to present it is super important. And it's something we don't do enough of. So starting with the very basics, I mean, Mike, you have a CV, right?
Yeah, and now that I listened to you, share about your first CV, I was also thinking about the first CV or resume that I had. And
Yeah.
yeah, it's pretty much similar. I just put in my hobbies and On top of that, I actually included the school seminars, symposiums, and other stuff that I got a certificate on to my CV. I don't know if that helped though, because
Yeah,
I stopped doing it nowadays. But yeah, that's
that's
because
it.
I didn't really know what to put in my CV, especially that, if you're fresh from school and you don't have that
Yeah,
experience yet, then yeah, it's basically a blank slate for you. So what can you put in there, right? So I guess that's one of the things that we can cover
Exactly.
in this episode.
Yeah, and 100%. And the things that I look for on a CV, or that I crafted mine around, was your personal profile. This is a paragraph or maybe 2 or 3 lines on your CV where you can convey who you are to the reader. Now, obviously, you're going to have your name on there. Ideally, some type of contact information. I've brought my CV up now to look at, and my CV now has my name, it has my address, my phone number, and my email address on it. They're not mandatory things. An email address is normally enough, but I feel like having your name first and foremost and your contact information is the first place you should start. I've seen a lot of CVs, especially from European countries, where people have a picture on there. That's definitely not common, and where I'm sort of been working, I have received CVs with pictures, and it's one of these things where you kind of look at it and go, I don't know what that added or took away from the
Oh,
CV.
it's common in the Philippines too.
So, oh, it is
I mean, my
really.
first CV had my picture in it.
Why? What does that in a picture? Take me through the process. What does that in a picture add to the CV?
To be honest, I don't know though what value it adds. Maybe it adds a face to the application. But then again, that could work both ways though. I mean, if you have someone who's judgmental and when it comes to physical appearances, then yeah, that may not
Mm,
work well to your advantage. But yeah, that's actually a good point. But in the Philippines, yeah, it is very common to have pictures or photos in your CV.
yeah. So I guess the answer there is read the market you're in, right? Name, contact information, maybe a picture. I mean, like I said, in the UK and in Americas, it's not common from what I've seen. Definitely in Europe, I have seen it. I've hired a couple of guys in Poland and in Ukraine and in Estonia, and they've all had pictures on their CVs. So maybe it's just a UK particular thing. So if you listen in the UK, don't do it. If you listen everywhere else, maybe do it. I guess it kind of reading the market that you're in.
Yeah,
The
if you're
next,
listening everywhere else, don't do it as well. I mean, I stopped doing it, so yeah.
but the thing is about a CV, right? Is it's or a resume. It's supposed to stand out. That's the whole reason you do a CV. It's your opportunity to sell yourself on 1, 2, 3, however many pages. Um, I'd always recommend trying to keep a CV as concise as possible, because as a hiring manager, you don't want to be sat there reading page after page after page about someone's experience. You kind of get a gist quite quickly. But yeah, that's the kind of purpose. So maybe that's where the picture thing comes from, is trying to make your CV stand out in some way.
Yeah, possibly. But to be honest, that could also be a time thing. Or I mean the period of time when you actually created or submitted your CV. I'm not sure if you've seen some recently, but I'm sure in the past that they probably did it because right now most of the people just, you know, spice up their LinkedIn profiles and then slap the link over their CV, and then maybe recruiters would just, visit their LinkedIn profiles if it's available. But not really sure. I mean, when it comes to standing up in your CV as well, I think technology made it so that most of the details or like how your CV looks doesn't matter that much anymore at the moment because we have AI, programs that goes through CVs by bulk and then just gets keywords. I've heard some stories about that, which we can probably cover it later in this episode. But yeah, that's also the thing about technology and how to stand out when you're applying for jobs.
100%. And, I was going to touch on it a little bit later, but, when you do submit your CV, there is systems that will scan over and look for a particular thing within your CV. That would always depend whether it's going directly to a company or to an agency, or or whoever is sort of being the person that reviews that CV for you. You got your contact information, you've got a personal profile, you've maybe got a picture. I wouldn't advise it, but obviously, as we discussed there, there's a bit of a at camp. The next thing I would put on there would be your core qualifications if you have them. So this could be, if you've done a course, what course you've done and how it's applicable. I have, any certifications I've got are in that section. And it's just a really simple, at a glance way of going, this is Matt, this is what he says about himself, this is the qualifications that he has. Now, qualifications could be education as well as professional. I don't think it really matters in the sort of core qualifications section. All you're doing is trying to create a place to make your profile jump out. After that, I would probably recommend work experience if you have any. If you don't have any work experience, this is a really good place to call out volunteer experience. So I tend to detail my title, if I had one, or whether it was volunteer or what role I'm doing, the company itself, and the dates I worked there. And then underneath that include a really simple, it tends to be a paragraph, maybe a slightly longer paragraph and a few lines about what I was doing at that role and, what my key achievements were. I've seen CVs where people have just put the role and then not explained it any further. And I think from a hiring manager perspective, you look at that and it kind of shouts out that this person either didn't do a great deal in the role or they don't have a huge pride about that role. So I think just putting a couple of lines in there to say, I worked at X company as X job title, and while I was there, I was responsible for, whatever it might be. It just helps to shout about a bit about what you're doing. And as you've rightly said, you can use, there are tools like Grammarly, there's AI tools that can help you craft that sentence or that paragraph to make it sound really strong. But I would definitely recommend having that there. So just to recap, work experience, your role, the company, the industry too, and a few lines about what you did at that role or at that industry. The reason that that's important is because, as Michael touched on earlier, you have tools that scan CVs looking for keywords. They're known as ATSs or applicant tracking systems. And this will tend to be when you submit your CV off to a business, an ATS, they'll put it through an ATS. I've worked with a couple in the past, and what it does is it'll scan your CV, providing it's in PDF or Word format, which is normally the ideal formats to submit them in, and it will look for, we are looking for a developer. So am I seeing developer keywords? And these keywords can be set by the business or can be set by the tool, but it will look for things like Java. It will look for things like SQL or terms that are applicable to the role that you're applying for. So making that work experience section concise, but also including some of the things that you've done will help your CV pop up on those applicant tracking services. What would you have next then, Michael? So we've got your profile, qualifications, and work experience. What else would you include on your CV?
I'm actually looking at my CV at the moment as well. I put in a small section that's called skills, but just to add a little bit more about what you touch about on work experience, and I 100% agree, where you need to add a few lines about what your role or what you did in that capacity on that company or as part of your experience, because nowadays job titles are, I don't really know what the right term is, but for some it's out of this world. Like people easily can create a job title that is very niche compared to in the past where you're a doctor, then yeah, you're a doctor. You're a cashier, you're a cashier. You're an accountant, you're an accountant. But now you have hundreds or maybe thousands of different variations to a single title. So it would be helpful not just for yourself but for the recruiter themselves to be able to understand a little bit of what you did in that role, because I know that for customer service agents, there's 100 different ways to put the title in, like customer experience manager. What else? Yeah, just go on LinkedIn and then type in customer service, and you definitely get all those different titles. Some would call themselves as manager, but in fact, they were just team leads, and those are different roles. So it would be nice to have like a little explanation or just a few lines of description as to what things you did in that role, just to help out, with the keywords as well, and to help out the recruiter see if you are indeed a good fit for the role that they're hiring for. And going back, yeah, I'm sorry for, that additional information, but yeah, I added a small section for skills, I think this helps for the keyword part as well. So for my case, I just put in, I have skills in product management, I have skills in customer service and all that. So it's a good way to add those words under that specific section, especially if you don't have that much of work experience when it comes to that job that you're applying for.
I think it's a really good shout. I mean, skills is I include it in the top end. I think as long as it's there, it's a good. It's a bit like putting tags on a video or putting like keywords in something. Like it's somewhere that if the OCV is going to go through one of those applicant tracking services, and you will never know, it will just go through. It's a good place where the system can go. Oh, it's mentioned, as you said, product, plan, scrum. Like there's these words that are popping up, and it will say, okay, I found 7 instances of the word product in this CV. So likely that person's going to have product experience. So I'm going to push that to the next stage. So having that skills section is, definitely a really, almost a must, I would say. Whether you have it under sort of embedded in qualifications in some way, or you have it personal skills, I think it's a really good place to have that information saved. I think another area that I see a lot, and I think it's quite a icebreaker during interviews, is hobbies and interests.
Mm.
You can look at a CV and it will paint a picture of you as an individual. The way that you get your personality across is through your hobbies and interests. And the hobbies and interests section can be, if managed right, can be a really good place, like I said, to break the ice during interviews, just to prompt a conversation. It can also be a bit of an awkward place. So, for example, the last role that I interviewed for during the hobbies and interests, the person had mentioned that he really enjoyed, I think it was kayaking, as part of his interest. So it was like, reading, kayaking, and some other physical sport. And I clicked on kayak and I thought, okay, I don't know anything about this. So to set this person at ease during an interview, I can talk about their hobbies and interests. And it's just a really simple place for the hiring manager or recruiter to go, actually, what common interests do I have with this person outside of their professional life? What common interests do we have? I've seen some really quite bizarre things in the hobbies and interests section before. But so I think keeping it as concise as possible, if you do have a hobby which is applicable to the role that you're applying to, definitely call it out. If you, I don't know, let's say you're applying to a role in a crypto company and you have for years done your own crypto mining, or you've set up your own crypto project, that should go in your experience definitely, but should go in your hobbies and interests too. So I think it's the hobbies and interests and skills sections are two which are often forgotten about, but are very key to kind of getting your personality and yourself across in the CV. I'd also recommend, depending on what role you're applying for, having multiple versions of your CV. So, for example, if you're applying for a role that's in a telecoms industry, look at your CV and look at what is in your skills and hobbies and interests that could be applicable to the telecoms industry. If you have work experience that is in telecoms, but it's sort of tweaked underneath other bits of experience, I would definitely call those areas out and look at maybe tailoring your CV so you have a generic CV that can go out to almost any role, a CV that can go out to financial services, a CV that can go out to development, retail, etc. Just having slight tweaks in your CV that makes it more tailored to the role that you're applying to.
Yes, that is very important to have as well. Personally, I have probably 8 different versions of my CV, which is very helpful as well if you're trying to, as what we've also mentioned in the previous episode, like trying to change your career or trying to figure out, like, if you want to get your hands in a specific industry or field. So, as what Matt said, tailoring your CV to reflect something that's very relevant to the role that you're applying for, that will definitely be very helpful for you.
Yeah, and I think the next part, so we know what sections we want to have. Now, when it comes to format and what actually makes a good CV, it's so subjective. What some people might be looking for in one CV might not match entirely with what another person's looking for. So when it comes to, how to actually format your CV and what type of template to put it into, there are resources online that can help with that. I know that Microsoft Word and Apple Pages have a built-in resume sort of template you can use. You can go to websites such as Monster and Total Jobs here in the UK that will give you a resume example that you can follow. So how you lay your CV out is really a reflection of your personality. So we can't say, it must be 16 pixels in text and this font and laid out in this particular way, but that will be on you to kind of convey your personality through.
Mhm.
When it comes to the content you put in, definitely following those sections will really help.
Yes, and to add to the resources that you touch on, like Monster in the UK, one thing that's also very popular nowadays is Canva. So a lot of people actually use Canva because of the ease of use for creating documents, and plus they have hundreds of community contributed templates that you can also copy and use for your CV.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because it's very visually attractive, the templates that you get from Canva. But anyways, I'm not gonna touch on that for now.
Hmm.
Matt mentioned one of the resources that gives out templates for CVs. I personally use the templates from Microsoft Word, and this has served me well for over the past 5 years. And yeah, that's it for CV templates.
I think when using these templates that you've got to be mindful of how big your CV gets. I've had quite a varied background and worked in a few different industries, and my CV is 3 pages. And I think some people would say that's too long. Some people would say, a CV has to be 2 pages. I haven't seen a hard and fast rule, really. I think if you are changing around rules quite a lot and you've moved around different industries, then your CV will naturally get bigger and bigger. There's sort of nothing that can be done about that. I think as long as what is relevant is on your CV, then I think there's not a wrong answer. For example, I worked in retail as one of my first jobs. Then I worked in the military, and then I got into IT. Now I probably wouldn't put 2 paragraphs about what I did in retail when I'm applying for an IT role. I'd probably just omit them, and my sort of professional CV starts with my first role in IT. Same with the military. I'll put it as my in my skills as these skills, and I obtained them from the military, but I wouldn't include my military role really on my CV, because although it shows a type of character, it doesn't necessarily have that correlation directly to the role I'm applying for. I think once you have your CV created, I think the next thing is to get it out there. So, you know what type of roles you're looking for. Hopefully by this point, you've crafted your CV and got that information together. You've got your profile, qualifications, work experience, hobbies, and skills. You've got it into a document, whether it be Word or PDF. I'd normally suggest PDF. I just find that a bit easier. So I'll create a document and export it as PDF. And then I upload it to different job sites. Now, the job sites that you're uploading to will depend on the industry that you're interested in. So again, it's quite difficult to give an explicit put it on this page. You can link CVs to your LinkedIn profile if you've created one, but you can also create a profile on very common job sites. I think the big ones in the UK are Reed, Total Jobs, and Indeed. You can create a profile, attach your CV, and a bit like the applicant tracking services do when you apply for a job, these systems will search your CV and then look at roles that it thinks are applicable. But it also makes that submitting of your CV very easy, because you apply for a role, your CV is already attached to the database, and you just submit with one click. So getting your CV into the place that you're going to be using to apply for roles is absolutely key. Once you've created it, making it available and making sure it's there for someone to grab hold of. Okay. When you've got your CV put together, you can then use tools, as Michael's mentioned at the beginning there, sort of things like AI or Grammarly, to check over and make sure that your CV is, presenting those keywords, but also in the best place it can be. I have definitely run my CV through AI tools in the past to make sure that the sentence structure makes sense. Where I've thought about something, half written it, then changed it, actually does it still make sense and convey who I am and what I'm trying to say? And there are also paid resources online, companies who will review a CV for you and let you know sort of if your CV is hitting the criteria that a hiring manager would look for. I would personally say early on in your career, it's not really worth investing the money into these services, because although they might give you some advice, it's probably not going to be that helpful if you don't have a huge amount of experience already. There's only so much you can edit something which might not have that much content to it. What I would say is submit your CV to a recruitment agency. And some of the best and most frank feedback I've got on my CV has come from recruiters and recruitment agencies, where they again know what a hiring manager is looking for. They know the type of content that they want to see, and I'm continuously, getting emails from recruitment agencies who have got hold of my CV that have said, this role's come up, and the hiring manager wants to see experience of this thing. Can you add it to your CV if you've got experience? Can you tailor this sentence to elaborate on this thing? So again, recruitment agencies are a really valuable resource in giving you that frank and honest feedback, and also how to tailor your CV if you have applied for a role to match what the hiring manager of that role is actually after.
And also, one piece of advice when creating your CV: be honest about what you put in your CV.
Oh, yes.
Yes, I know, Matt. We've had instances in the past where, but yeah, be honest. And I know it's tempting to put in, stuff that you find online that you probably have some idea about, but you didn't really have any experience or that much hands-on knowledge about it. So if you're not sure about it, don't include it in your CV, because one way or the other, you are going to be caught in that lie and it's not going to look good.
100%. There's a bit of a meme here in the UK, which is, lied on their CV, and it's, normally a way of showing an image of work that's been done badly or poorly. There is definitely a case for learn on the job, but I would say on your CV, try and be as honest as possible, because you're either going to get found out during an interview or within the first few months, and then that potentially looks a bit more tricky to try and explain why you were at a job for 2 or 3 months, because actually something you said on your CV wasn't entirely accurate, and then you didn't remain there for much longer. So I think being as honest as humanly possible on your CV, as Michael said, there really gives that much better impression of who you are and what you're about. We laugh because we've both worked with people, and seen some CVs where you look at it and go, that's really, I don't understand how that can be true. And I don't understand how that person thought they had that skill set. And there is many a story we could recount of individuals that we've worked with who have had themselves as a senior manager, and they've come into the business, and actually some of the questions they're asking really don't reflect what was written on their CV. So be honest, be concise, and try and avoid embellishing or elaborating too much. It will only come back to bite you if it's found out.
Yeah, exactly true. And there's also one thing that you can avoid if you just stay honest in your CV. We're probably going to talk about this in future episodes when we come up to the topic about, surviving the actual workplace, because there's this thing called imposter syndrome. And lying on your CV is probably one of the best contributors to the imposter syndrome. So, yeah, more about it in future episodes. But bottom line is just be honest. Yeah. And also, Matt, I think we can come up with probably a bonus episode about all those, lying on your CV bloopers. That would be a fun one to, record.
We might do it. Yeah, we might do it. I think that will that would be quite interesting to kind of to recount and go through those stories. There is some really good resources if you're not entirely sure of what to include on your CV. And again, I'll put the links in the show notes for this episode. The rule of thumb I would use is if it's something you would talk about in a professional environment, then absolutely put it on your CV. If it's something that maybe you wouldn't talk about in a work environment, then maybe don't put it on your CV. A good example, and I'll use one in the past, is someone I interviewed had put on there that they were in the top percentage of Fortnite players for the country, which again is a really interesting achievement, but it doesn't necessarily relate to the role that they were applying for. So it's like, if they were applying to a games development company, or a company that specialized in development in that way, that would be a really interesting and cool thing to have on your CV. But to a software house that we were at the time, it just didn't match and didn't translate, and it actually brought their CV down a bit, because you would see work experience, and then it was work experience 2 months while they kind of took time off to become a top rated player in Fortnite. And it was like, okay, well, I see, but I don't fully understand how that translates to the role that you're looking for now. So yeah, being honest, being concise, and keeping things as neat and tidy as possible, I think, are the biggest piece of advice we can give here.
Mm-hmm. just came to my mind, kind of like a eureka moment. But if you're someone who's in the content creation industry, or perhaps maybe social media or marketing or anything that has to do with something that you've actually done in the past, this also goes out to freelancers or those who have not been contractually employed. But it's also important to add in probably links or copies of your portfolio or things that you've done in the past, just to showcase your experience in that field. I guess it also goes out to developers as well, right? Like, things that you've worked on in the past. So you can add it to like maybe a small portfolio section, depending on the job or the industry that you're really in.
Okay, so we've done a lot of talking about CVs in this episode. As we've touched on, making sure that your CV is in a format that is readable, making sure it's in either Word or PDF, having those key sections, such as personal profile, core qualifications, work experience, and then skills and hobbies, if it's applicable. Making sure that your CV is concise and truthful, it is really important. And then also trying to tailor it to roles that it is applicable for. Isn't as important, but like I said, having a couple of copies that you can send to maybe different industries is definitely a work smart idea. With that being said, I think we've covered everything we can on CVs. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, you can always get in touch with us with our contact details being in the show notes. I think that's everything from my side. Over to you, Mike.
Yeah, you pretty much said everything that's on my mind as well. So, yeah, if you want to reach out to us, if you have any comments, suggestions, reactions, or even violent reactions, feel free to reach out to us in our YouTube channel with the same name. And we're also including a link in the episode show notes containing a way that you can send us a voice message that we can include in future episodes as well. And having said that, Matt, do the honors.
Yep, that's it from us. Thank you so much for joining us on this journey.
All right.
Thanks a lot,
Bye-bye.
guys. Bye bye.